Telling Our Narrative. I'm Brooke Thomas. Mari Acevedo is a business professional in biotech based out of New York City. She's joining the show today along with Chris Holliday, based in Tampa with Holliday Bakes. She's a pastry chef, excuse me. Pastry, I guess, is a tongue tire. I didn't even notice that. And a business owner. I'm excited to have you both here. As always, co-executive producer OJ Smith is joining us as well. Chris, I want to start with you before we get into our stories. I think your name may be familiar to people who have read about you in the news. And if you want to just touch on quickly why we may have heard your name in national news recently.
Well, you probably heard my name because I was most recently fired for standing for Black Lives Matter movement. Through my social media, a personal page. I worked for a private company in Tampa that did not agree that I should be the face of the company any longer because of my stance with Black Lives Matter. So they let me go after a fellow colleague showed them my personal page where I just posted like a number of things like, hashtag Black Lives Matter or the George Floyd video, recent events that are happening in the community, in the Black community. We're all, for the most part, I can say that we're all pretty peaceful, so it wasn't anything outrageous or, of any sorts. So it was basically just because of my stance and my beliefs. They let me go. It wasn't their quote unquote look.
What did they tell you as far as why they were letting you go?
Interesting. That's a good question. The thing that stood out to me the most was that I make them look like oppressors by doing so, when I actually believe that if you allow your employees to talk about things that matter to them, and I don't think that makes you look like an oppressor. I think that makes you look like, hey, we let our employees stand for things that they believe, what's important to them. We also care about things that are important to them, but it didn't come across that way to them. I told them, I didn't feel that way. That must be a personal problem you got to deal with because I don't feel that way. I never said it. So that's something that you got to deal with personally.
And I think I also read a statement from the company. And did they imply in the statement that you quit or?
Yeah.
Discrepancy there, right?
Yeah, there was a bit. I mean, they have made more than one statement, none of which are the same. So that's a telltale there. But the one that really stood out the most was that they would never be like colorblind. They said that like we at Seminole Heights General Store will never be colorblind. And I think like we don't want you to not see us. That's not the point. So that was another red flag for people to really catch a glimpse of what really happened behind the scenes there. I didn't quit. I asked for a personal day after they told me that I make them look like oppressors. I was like, yeah, after 5 years of working here and never taking a day off, I think this is the day that I'm going to take a day off. And so I don't know how that was misconstrued. I never said I quit. I mean, so it was a rude awakening when I woke up to go get ready for work, and they said, oh, your final check will be waiting for you Friday. And I said, okay, that's fine.
And for the record, the company is acknowledging that you are no longer part of the team, but denying everything else essentially publicly, right?
Yeah, when they made that statement on the internet the first time they did it on Facebook, I mean, the community went crazy just because there's a bunch of red flags in the text itself. And they're trying to put out fire after fire after fire, and people are calling and they're telling them that I'm still working there after they just put out a statement that I quit. And then shortly later, they say I'm fired. And then shortly later after that, they say I'm still there. And then shortly after that, I don't even work there anymore.
Right.
So, or I never worked there, So, be careful what you say if you can't really back it up, because you're always going to lose that one.
I think it's important also to note that you have turned this into a huge positive for you, right? And like decided to step out on your own and focus on your own company and use this as kind of like a launch pad for
Absolutely.
that, right?
I think it's very important. Me personally, I believe that it's very important, instead of looking at what's been taken away from you,
Mm-hmm.
look at what's been given to you. And they most definitely can't take away my power. Most definitely. Like, that's something that's never going to be able to be taken away from me. And then you get to a certain point where you're like, okay, well, I want to discuss my beliefs freely, especially, I mean, being Black, having Black children, having a Black father. You know what I mean? This is something that's very important to me. So I want to make it to a point where I can make change. I can speak about it freely. Everybody can speak it freely who comes, and works alongside Holiday Bakes. Or I would like to encourage being around people that believe in the same things. And so just create your own path if that's the case. And.
Well, we're glad to have you here. Glad to have you here sharing your perspective. Madi, you as well, obviously. And let's get into it. Let's do it. First story, the president of the United States is being criticized right now after what he said about the death toll from the new coronavirus. After Trump said it's all under control, he was being interviewed. It was an interview with Axios for HBO. And interviewer Jonathan Swan pressed him on the fact that 1,000 Americans are dying each day from COVID-19. Trump responded with, they are dying. That's true. It is what it is. But that doesn't mean we aren't doing everything we can. It's under control as much as you can control it. Madi, I want to start with you. What's your reaction to that? Do you feel like things could be categorized as under control?
I don't think we've ever had this under control. I mean, I don't know where everybody's based, but I'm in New York City. We had like the worst amount of deaths. We had such a hard time controlling this. And I think that we did a decent job. And even then, and Kuma was out there talking to us every single day. And even then, I was looking around and I'm like, I feel like we just weren't prepared. So we're constantly trying to catch up. And compared to other countries, it's insane that he would even say this is, under control. We have kids going back to school in September and nobody knows what's happening. I've spoken to so many moms. No one has any idea of what's happening, if they're sending their kids to school, what the plans are. So how can you say that something is under control when people are still really afraid to go back into a normal life? I would assume under control means you can find a little bit of normal in your daily routine. And I don't think that people have found that yet. So to say normal, or to say like, we have this under control, is just, I think the way that Trump speaks is out of the realm of reality. Because to know that 1,000 people are dying a day, and to even assume that that's under control is just insane. And just overall a lack of empathy and a lack of regard for human life, because that's a lot of people. And I know that everybody's like, oh my God, but there's so many millions and millions of people. Granted, but until that touches you personally, it's like, how can you sit here and account, even if it's one person, to sit here and say it is what it is? That's just such a lack for humanity that it just shows like where we're at as a country.
Chris, I want to bring you in because, Madi, I think you make a good point, which kind of perfectly was basically about my next question, which is, do you think that there's been a shift in how we talk about death? Like the actual gravity of one person losing their life, somebody's mother, somebody's daughter, sister, father, family member, friend, and how big of a deal that actually is. You hear people talking, and experts, officials are saying, hey, yes, kids are gonna get sick. Some kids are gonna get sick. And then you see scientists and epidemiologists saying some people who get sick are going to die, and we're not 100% sure who that's gonna be. Have you noticed that? Like maybe being desensitized to what death actually is?
Desensitized. Yes, most definitely. And there's a lot of lack of empathy as well. I agree. It doesn't really hit you until it hits close to home, and it's sad that it takes that much at this point of time. But we're now 1,000 people a day, that's a lot. And I hope it doesn't become like the new normal where we're just so desensitized by it. But I think it's very important that we take the knowledge that we're given and protect our own families. I mean, President Trump could make it, anything he wants. He could say it is what it is, all he wants, and it's this way because everybody's getting tested, and just take it with a grain of salt, honestly, because we know the numbers. I think we know the numbers very well, and I think that we see that he has a lack of empathy. So with that being known and stated, I think that we should really just be conscious of the decisions that we make for our children, how often we're out, because at this point, I feel like we don't have a trusted source or a trusted president. I don't feel safe. I don't feel like he's taking this seriously. And so he's really putting it all on us, the people, I feel, to make the decisions for ourselves. And so we can sit here all day and listen to him and get upset about it. But at the end of the day, it's like, hey, yeah, we do know you lack empathy. So here's what's going to happen. You have to make the decision. Are you going to send your children to school? Or are you not?
And unfortunately, that's proven to be such a difficult question for so many people. It seems simple, like, no, I'm not going to send my kids to school, but not everybody has
the luxury of
not everybody. And so that's been
wow.
And
that's been interesting.
Problem, right? Like that's part of what he does, right? Trump created this narrative that this isn't that big of a deal, and he normalized 1,000 people dying. When we had 800 people dying a day, he was literally, this is at the worst of the pandemic, and he was just acting like, oh well, New York has to deal with that. New York is part of the U.S. Like, this is your country that you're leading. So right then and there, I knew already where his
and blame the governors.
Right.
The individual governors, like, no, are you the leader of this country or not?
But he set this narrative, right? That this is like you said, it is desensitizing people, and he's kind of creating this almost new normal. But in doing that, he's also cutting funding. So when you're looking at schools even thinking about not opening, he's saying like, okay, well, we're not going to fund the schools, and we're going to pull this. These are schools that are public schools where there's tons of kids going, depending on food, depending on shelter, depending on all types of services, and you're threatening to cut funding. So how are these schools, how does that even translate to parents, right? How do they feel safe where there's already like a threat to defund schools, to send their kids off and know that these schools are going to be sanitized properly, that they are going to be isolated if there's an incident, like all of these other things. So yeah, of course, a lot of parents now are being faced with this really difficult choice. And you're now like for New York at least, I know some districts are even closer, but you're like 3 weeks away from school. And there still is like no direction on where we're going. That's where we're at as a country. Like, that is really telling. We are supposed to be one of the greatest nations in the world, and we don't have a plan for our kids. Last year, my daughter is 16, and she's been trying to decide what, if she's going to do the hybrid program or if she's going to do online entirely. And one of the things that she was talking to me about, she's like, 3 million kids last year did not do any schoolwork at all. From March till the end of the school year, they did absolutely no schoolwork because they didn't have the means, or because the parents couldn't support them, or whatever. They just weren't in a space. Do you know how much that is to have 3 million kids that were not educated last year? From March till the end of the school year. That is unheard of. So you're going to tell me that in all that time, 3 months they've had essentially, and they haven't been able to come up with a plan because the government cannot, for the better of everyone, come together and just say, hey, let's put our differences apart. This isn't even something political. This is a health crisis, and let's just come together and create a plan. We're just in a bad place. As a country, we're in a bad place.
Let's move into our next story. No, you guys are great. You're awesome. Yeah. It's Texas Christian University head football coach Gary Patterson is in hot water right now after using the N-word twice, both versions of the word, so we're clear, while talking to his student players. TCU redshirt freshman linebacker Jordan Patterson posted a statement on Twitter, and language is uncomfortable for people. I allow people to speak how they want freely. I don't usually like curse on air, but when it's a podcast, it's different from TV where you can't put up a statement and allow someone to read it. And also when you're talking about different versions of a racial slur, unfortunately, I feel like I have to read it so it's very clear for everyone listening. So people are going to be offended by that. Hopefully the fact that I'm Black, lessens that a little bit. Yeah, we'll see. So the statement on Twitter, he said his coach called him out about an Instagram post saying, "You're a fucking brat. I'll send you back to Pitt." And following with, "You've been saying niggas in the meeting room." So afterwards, Jordan says some of his teammates asked him about the conversation and they decided that while they were figuring out what to do, they were not going to practice. The coach came to talk to them about it and says to the players, "I wasn't calling him a nigger." Jordan ended his statement with, "This behavior is not okay now or ever, and there needs to be repercussions to these actions." The coach himself put out a statement after all of this broke, saying he met with some of the players about this, and he said, "I apologize for the use of a word that in any context is unacceptable. I have always encouraged our players to do better and be better, and I must live by the same standards." Chris, I'll start with you this time. Do you think it's feasible that a man who has coached young Black men for many years in an environment like this didn't know that that wasn't appropriate? Or do you think that this is about a lack of respect for those very young men? Or do you think that this is all a big, much to do about nothing?
There's a few ways I feel about this. For one, I feel like you should never use the word. Two, he said it both ways though. He said it both ways. Like, you added the ER at the end of it all, man. It's like, that's not cool. Like, at first I had one thought, like, you're just like repeating what he said and using it as an example. And I honestly don't really feel like you should do that because that's not your place. And I don't know how old this man is, but he's a grown man and he should probably know by now that you don't. And then proceeded to add the ER later. It kind of rubs me the wrong way. It truly does. I don't know why. Maybe it just comes with some sort of like grief that we all kind of carry as Black people with that. But he shouldn't have repeated it. I understand that he was upset. I do understand that. I do appreciate him bringing it up that he shouldn't. Because I think that we as Black people should be held accountable, and I do understand that we use it, but I don't know, I wouldn't be using it around my white friends, or you know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't be saying it around anybody because of things like this. Because once I say it in front of you, you're gonna think that that's cool, and we're not cool like that. We're really not.
Right, not if you want to remain friends.
Right.
Yeah. And then he took it a step further. Like, man, he was upset probably that the dude told on him maybe, and then showed his true colors later by adding the ER. Like, "Oh, I'm gonna show you." Yeah, you know what I mean? That's what I feel like. He felt like, "Oh, I'm gonna show you." You know what I mean? Like, you thought it was bad before.
I think that's how a lot of people feel. Madi, I think something that, like, players in general, they're always like, there's like a constant criticism that they have entitlement issues, right? This is in pro sports, and we're talking about college students here too. So I think that that's really important, that these are essentially kids. Yes, technically once you're 18, you're an adult, but we've all been 18, 19, 20, 21. And we know how childlike that is. Yeah. Especially like emotionally, but I think that there is always a focus on players having entitlement issues, right? And not as much of a conversation on what happens to them, how they're treated by coaches, by fans, by society in general. And I don't know, why do you think that is?
I don't know. I don't think that this is a case of entitlement though.
Uh-huh.
I think that this is a case of like a generational difference. And it's not just that it's being perceived in sports. I think in general, what I've seen is a really big difference in this upcoming generation and the way that they handle um, discrimination and disrespect, right? I feel like I grew up in a generation where it was a lot more tolerant. They are not tolerating it at all. Like,
And they
it's
have
not.
platforms.
No, yeah, right. And that's the
They,
thing. They know that they can cancel you out. They know that they have power in numbers. They know that they can put all your stuff out there and get you out of here like this. And I don't think that that's entitlement. I think that they're just like, hey, we saw that you guys were really passive and we are not taking that route. And it can be misconstrued as being entitled, because I tell my kids that all the time. I'm like, your generation is so entitled. But I think that they're like, no, we're not doing that. We're not waiting. They're not playing the waiting game. They're like, it's now. So if you use the N word, yeah, I'm gonna call you out. Where it's like, I feel like my generation would have been like, oh, whatever, they would have kind of let it pass and they would have been upset, but they would have internalized it. I think this younger generation is just like, no, we're not doing that anymore, because we do have the platform and we can let it be known that we're not accepting it.
and you know what I meant by like entitlement, the criticism, which I don't think is fair, is always that it's not, these like young men and women aren't treated as if they are human beings who deserve to always be treated like human beings, regardless of what they've achieved, regardless of how much you like sports, or you know what I mean, where you want them to go or be, that these are human beings who have their own agency, who deserve their own agency, and deserve to be treated as such.
Yeah, and deserve to be respected. And anybody who uses the N word so freely, especially with the ER, it really, I mean, come on, I've never said it with the, like, never, not even, I've read books and I cringe just seeing it written out. So for you to even say it, like vocalize it, that means that you've said it before and you felt very comfortable.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, also too, if somebody says that they're uncomfortable, whether it's the N-word or not, or here's my thing, like there's been many times just with racial things and you bring it up to somebody's attention and they're like, well, I didn't mean it that way, or that's not what I meant, I was just or it's always like a combative argument instead of being like, I'm sorry I hurt your feelings.
Yeah, like let me treat you how you've asked to be treated. Yeah.
Right.
And it's simple. People don't curse in church. They don't cuss in front of their grandmas. Like everyone knows how to shift their behavior out of respect.
Why are you upset?
I'm upset. Right. All right. Our third story, it's a big topic. And Madi and I, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, actually. So what started with a conversation about a lack of diversity, it ended in kind of like a big, messy Twitter battle. It was a mess. There's an article in the LA Times, and this is the headline. Emmys 2020 nominees are more diverse, but Latino representation still abysmal. And I'm pretty sure the headline was changed, and I've been trying to like double check that, but nevertheless, people were pinpointing one specific part of the article in particular, this line. The writer, Michael Ordona, wrote, "There have been no Latino performers among the lead and supporting nominees for comedy or drama series in the last 6 years, despite accounting for 18% of the population." So there was confusion and accusations of like ignoring an Afro-Latino actor, because everyone knows last year Jharrel Jerome won the Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Limited Series or Movie for When They See Us, and he's Dominican. So tagging onto this conversation, actor John Leguizamo tweeted the link to the article and a screenshot of the headline, and he added, "Why can't we Latinx have a piece of the pie? We are the largest ethnic group in America, and missing as if we didn't exist." Orange is the New Black actress Selena Sleva responded with, "Well, we should start with supporting each other and celebrating all our Latinx community. Many of us do not, and I repeat, do not support each other. Let's unite, make noise, demand change. Latinas in Hollywood, stop the BS and unite." Yeah, I said it. Then also another Orange is the New Black, which was a really great show, actress Dasha Polanco added to the conversation with, if it's only us speaking up on it, no one cares. It's the silence from those that fight for equality, but only their equality. Diversity, but diverse enough to include thyself. That mentality of, as long as I'm good, I don't see a damn thing. So the thing is, and I think the story and part of what's important is that Latin American actors, actresses, even stories of all of the cultures don't exist to the level that they should at all under any different spotlight or magnifying glass. They're vastly underrepresented in Hollywood. And it seems that point got overshadowed. What do you think, Mari?
All right, so I have a ton of thoughts, obviously.
You're the only Afro-Latino person here, so it's like, I feel like half
No. I feel like Dasha Polanco was coming from a place of frustration, and I don't agree with her sentiments. I want to say that because I don't think that I think sometimes Latinos feel like our struggles, like because we don't get the support from mass media, we're alone. I feel like sometimes we feel like, okay, well, Black voices need to amplify our struggle, but often we don't do the same. And so I think that we need to first deal with that. So that's one thing. That's why I can't fully support what she's saying. However, what she's saying, not even just her, but what the article is saying, even though, yeah, they didn't acknowledge that, there was someone who received an Emmy last year. Latinos are really just ignored in America. They really are. And for being like one of the largest groups, the largest minority group in America, it's kind of like insane how we're not seen. And it's in conversations about everything. And it's because even with, we've spoken about this a lot, but even with issues of identity, like we don't even get to identify ourselves the way that we see ourselves. We are just like, so like, I feel like we're just kind of like, everything is okay. It's what we're saying here because we're in America now. And so it kind of shuts us up in a big way. But you don't see the representation in media. You don't see the representation in workplaces. You don't see the representation in movies or in shows. And so, yeah, I think, when you're talking about diversity, a lot of the diversity goes to the Black movement. And when I say the Black movement, it's not that it's not including Latinos, but because there are such issues of identity within the Latino population, I think identifying Latinos on their own, whether they're Black or white, I think that's where a lot of like the misconception comes, that there, seems to be some kind of representation where there isn't. Because if you're a Black person, a Black Latino, and you're mostly playing Black roles and you're not really showcasing your Latino side or your Latinidad, as they say, it's hard for Latinos to be like, oh my God, that's representation, because it doesn't feel like it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where Dasha is coming from, and others are coming from. And every time that we do talk about our struggles, we're kind of like, oh, well, shut up. You guys are anti-Black, you're anti-this, you're anti, yes, we have a lot of issues, but that doesn't mean that we don't have our struggles. And I feel that. I see the conversations go on even on Twitter and like social medias where it's kind of like, you guys have so many issues. You guys are so anti-Black. You're so this. You're talking about a group of people that have also dealt with, colonization, that have had like a ton of struggles, that have been, under oppression for centuries. So yeah, to sit here and just kind of dismiss all of the traumas that the Latino population has gone through just because you've experienced negative things or have heard negative things. Not even everybody's even, experienced these things, but you see it flowing very fluidly through social media. Like, well, the Latino population is just super anti-Black and they're super racist, and so we don't care. It's difficult. And a lot of times I don't think people realize that Latinos, there is a big part of the population that isn't even, it's not legal. And so when you're talking about uniting and like, let's all come together, we're all coming at different struggles, right? So somebody who doesn't have like citizenship or isn't legal in the United States is not going to sit here and start protesting, okay? Because once they get arrested, they're getting, so we're talking about completely different struggles. So when you you know, I think that there's just so much compacted in that it's really difficult for me to say, oh my God, they're completely wrong, because I do think that we are largely ignored until it comes time for voting. Then all of a sudden everybody loves a Latino. But until then, what goes on? Nothing, right? We're one of the hardest hit with the COVID cases. We've been like, our communities are constantly getting hit with all these different things. You don't really hear about it as much as you hear about the Black community getting hit with COVID, or like the death rate being higher and all this stuff. And I see it because it's kind of like, well, you guys have Univision, so go listen to your news over there. They'll say it in the stats, but they don't really, you know, I don't feel like we're really talked about in a way that shows that America cares about us.
No, I think that was a good point. Go for it, Chris.
Oh, no. Go. I was just saying, I agree with you. I do feel like sometimes I personally don't see you guys. I'm just speaking for myself. I don't hear stories about you guys as often. I don't see you in the, you know, the Emmys. I don't know you guys' names by heart, where you guys have played multiple roles in movies, like leading roles, and I'm like, I don't know the person's name or whatever. And I appreciate you sharing what you shared, because it brings light to why I don't see you, you know. So I'm sorry you feel that way.
No, I mean,
I think separating Dasha's tweet out, we can dissect that in a bit, but there is still such an issue helping people understand that Black Latin American people are just as Latin American as their non-Black counterparts. And a big way in the middle of this conversation to help that is like representation. So we, you know, seeing more stories about that. We don't learn about that in school. We don't learn that Blackness doesn't just exist in Africa and the United States. We don't learn about the fact that Brazil has the largest Black population outside of Africa. It's actually not the US. We don't learn about, you know, the Dominican Republic and Haiti, and how, like, just based on logic, how, like, obviously there would be a lot of Black people Asians everywhere, right? Or Black Asian people, exactly. Black Jewish people, we talked about this the last episode. Everything is spoken about. And I think that also what's being pointed out is everybody, no one is exempt from internalized white supremacy, right? And in conversations, there's always such separation between cultures that intersect. We don't necessarily have to have conversations about, like, it's always weird to have conversations and say Black people and then Latino people, as if that the part of the reason that Latin Americans are the biggest minority is because that also includes a lot of Black Latin Americans. It's not, it's a big group of people that don't all come from the exact same place and look the exact same way. And we're not taught that in school. We are not shown that on television. We are, those stories aren't told. And I think, I think that's an important point. And I'll say it again, I do think that it is sad that got overshadowed by a whole bunch of other issues. The fact that, right, it's Twitter, but the fact that that is important. And I also, you said something, Madi, like, and I think one of the people said that in the tweet, that, you know, we all have to get more focused on the fact that you don't have to wait for somebody to do something for you before you do something for somebody else. You don't have to, someone else achieve, and at the same time, someone else achieving something doesn't hurt you.
Right.
And we all, I think, need to work on that. Just that we should be freely speaking out for every different culture, identity, everybody, because that just helps progress.
I know, everybody. It's kind of a shame that I know Lin-Manuel had that movie in the Heights coming out this summer, and it's a shame that it didn't, because I feel like it's probably one of those movies that's like so needed, because it's about Latinos in the Heights. And I think that that's the other thing too, right? Like you see Latinos and you think like it's one, it looks the same across the country. But like if you're in California, like I have friends in Cali that they're like, we've never seen Black Latinos because it's mostly, you know, Mexican people, and they don't consider them Black. But like if you go to New York and you go up to like, you know, anywhere from Spanish Harlem all the way up to the Heights to the Bronx, it's all Dominicans and Puerto Ricans. They are not considered like what, like for the most part, we're considered Black, you know, Black Latinos. And so it's a very different, you know, it's a very different canvas across the country. And I think that that matters also because the representation you see, right? So we've never really seen a movie like this, like, you know, to that scale with somebody that talented, putting it out there. With people that like Latinos that look like us, really, because a lot of times when you see Latinos on screen, they look like, you know, and then people think like, oh, Mexican Latinos are all white looking, but unfortunately, it just so happens that it's the fair skinned ones that make it onto TV. But that's generally, but you don't really see Latinos with the curly hair or the Afro looking Latinos, dark skin look Latinos. You know, you don't see that on TV. And so it's a shame that they pushed the movie back because I think, especially like the times that we're living now, that would have been kind of like a booster for us.
I think I'm glad we had this conversation. Yeah. I'm glad that
living in LA, I never see any Black Latinos. Like that's kind of a foreign concept to me. Like most of my my Latino friends, they say the same. Like it's they don't really see each other as the same. And for me, most like I never really like everybody I know that's Puerto Rican or Dominican is from the East Coast. Yeah, you never see anybody like that out here.
I think I had to be. I was definitely still in like school the first time I heard David Ortiz speak. I'm from Oklahoma, so obviously, you know, I was remember being like, "What?" Because he looks like me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But he doesn't sound like me, and the first time you're exposed to something like that shouldn't be a baseball player on TV. Thank God for him, but like we should be educated about these things in school. We shouldn't be taught. Even we are terrible at teaching people about slavery, right? Terrible about it. And even at the poor education level that we are about it, we still are super uber focused on like West. You know, the West is the only thing that matters. We still don't even like, you know what I mean? Like we can't get it right here, but we still almost act like there were, you know, only these many ships and they only came here.
Right. We don't learn about like what happened before.
Yeah,
so there's no movie that's like Slavery, the prequel, you know? We don't know anything that happened, but like this country only focuses on what happened here. And we
don't even do that good enough.
Right.
It's
I mean, that's kind of part of the problem, but even with that, right? Like, just to finish it out real quick, but I think that's kind of like been a personal issue for me is that, you know, a lot of this I didn't learn until later on in life either, you know, and I'm first generation born, but I didn't learn about the transatlantic slave trade until college, right? So I didn't realize like we had such a proximity to Africa until that time. Of course, I never thought I was white, right? I grew up around white people, and I think that that's also another thing to understand that you know where you live and like where you grow up, the way you see race is relative to that, to your community. So I didn't grow up in an area where it was easy to
hide. You guys need to travel to Tampa sometime. They're out here.
I know.
Yeah. But my first experience was in high school, and I was like, oh wow, like I go to how do you say it, like a majority Black based school, you know. I'm from Florida originally, so yeah, it's like super country, you know, and then I get here and I'm thinking that it's just like black and white, and then you realize at the age of 17, 18 that wow, these are Dominicans, Haitians. These are, you know, they're not what we consider African Americans, right. Or you know what I mean.
Point is that
also even that phrase, it became. It was kind of like, okay, we're going to use this term African American because it's better than what we've been calling them, but it's not inclusive.
Right. That's what I was gonna. That was what I was trying to get to, is that I think that there's a misconception of what Blackness is in America. And so when it comes to Latinos identifying ourselves, like I've struggled, right? Because for a large portion of my life, I was told I was Black. And then another portion of my life, it was like, no, you're not Black. You know, we're not using that one drop rule. I saw it yesterday on Twitter. Somebody was saying
it's
that.
a lot of drops though. So it's, I mean,
right, it's 10 drops.
Like,
it's half the drops.
Like, you know, the way that people police your identity and your race is so insane to me, right? So it's kind of like hard. Like I've seen the conversation come up a lot where it's like, you know, if you say you're Black, people tell you like, no, you're not really Black. And then if you say you're not Black, oh, Latinos are anti-Black, you don't, you know, you don't care about your roots. And it's like, okay, we have to really start to think a little bit deeper when we're policing people's identities, because until we really understand identity and race, which is super complicated, you can't really tell somebody what they are, you know?
And for sure.
That brings a lot of, that kind of, that's just been like a personal journey for me, like just watching that. And for a long time, as I was older, I was really hesitant to say I was Black. And it wasn't because I didn't feel Black. It was like, because I've been told so many times, like, you're not Black. You're not fully Black. You can't say you're Black. You don't belong here. And it was like, whoa, it was so different from how I grew up, where it was like, I grew up with the Black community and it was like, well, you're one of us, right? So I was like, okay, you know, so it's weird. It's just one of those things that until you experience it and you really, you know, you kind of feel through all of that, it's hard to navigate.
We've got to all like
what
do
I don't,
better.
I'm sorry. Yeah, what I don't understand is like there's history behind that place. All those islands and how everybody got there. Right. There's history, right? And nobody ever brings that up, and I don't understand why. Like there was a population of people on all of those islands before Black people got there, before white people got there. What happened to them? Nobody asked that. So and then it's like, okay.
Well, look at how we talk about what happened to the people here. Manifest Destiny.
Right.
All that weird
right.
stuff.
So, right. And like, that's part of the people they end up, well, not Americans, but they wiped those people out. Like, they either couldn't do the work or died from disease, or they just cleared them out to make space for themselves. But what was lost on me is why the Puerto Rican and Dominican populations and communities don't talk about that part of their history. Because I mean, even in Haiti and Dominican, like how
another podcast for that.
It's like, we don't
it's
have
just confusing. Like
today.
These are facts, bro.
Yeah, we could
these
talk
are facts.
about that, like
facts are facts.
You know, a whole nother time, because I'm telling you, you need a whole podcast just to get into the Dominican thing. It's crazy.
I have been encouraging parents that have decided to homeschool their children through COVID-19 to start looking into Black curriculums to decolonize the school curriculum. For the simple reason is that the same reasons that you guys are bringing up and topics that we don't know these things is because we weren't taught them, because schools were made in America. The whole point of them was to Americanize people. To take away culture, to regain a new culture so that you can be ready for the work field in America. They don't want you to learn anybody else's culture. They want you to be Americanized. And so you take a group of children and you basically colonize them and strip them away years and years and years and years, strip all their culture away. And that's how we got here. And so now I'm encouraging parents. I have a 8-year-old and a 9-year-old, and I've decided not to put them back into school for more than just COVID, because now I'm at a place where I'm in headlines and I'm not going to send my children to school for them to be treated, you know, in a crazy manner. Also, I want to teach them our history. I believe that we weren't taught enough. I believe that we don't know enough, and there's lots of Black curriculums out there. There's lots of ways to decolonize the school education. There's lots of ways for children to understand this before they're our age, before they're 18 and they move out to, you know, South Florida or whatever the case may be. They don't have to wait to be in college for this. That's up to us. That's up to you. That's up to, you know, everyone working together as a village to help educate the future of this country. And it starts with us. So if you notice a problem and you have the resources to do so, man, go ahead with your bad self then, because they don't teach them that. They don't. And so that's about to change with me. There's a lot of other people that are doing it as well. So yeah, look into it.
I think we need they need to make like a Netflix series called Slavery the Prequel, and show like the beginning of colonization and how everybody got to where they are, like just the history of colonization and how Europe swept through Africa. Mm-hmm. I think that would explain a lot to people. I think that would, I mean, it settled a lot for me when I fell down a rabbit hole on YouTube one day and I learned all about colonialism for months. And it explained so much, like what's going on in Africa, why the things are like they are. That's when I learned that most of the slave ships went to South America rather than America. Like, I had no clue. I thought, not that we were the only ones, but
we
were the main ones.
Everything we're taught is that we're the only thing, even, you know.
Right. And so I feel like, you know, if it's just a lot of people learn things through entertainment, right? Like a lot of what white people learned about slavery came from a movie. It didn't come from school, or it had to come from somewhere else. So I know through entertainment, a lot of people, it sparks at least, you know, some curiosity. So I've been feeling that if there was a series of like the beginning of colonization and where it went and how it affected, maybe like a long 20-part series. It has to be long because it's been a long time, but everything until Black people got to America. Because before Black people got to America, a lot of them they went to South America and the islands first before they even got here. And like that story needs to be told. The story of the islands needs to be told. The story of what happened to the Black people that got left behind or they didn't take. Because when I went to Ghana, there's a big long story about the people that didn't go or that wasn't taken, wasn't kidnapped. And like all of those stories needs to be told along with ours.
I agree.
I think it would really educate people, and a lot of people would, a lot of questions would be answered. A lot of fights could be settled, you know?
Yeah.
Completely
Black
agree.
History Month and public schools need to go a little bit further than same old oppression.
Right.
It does. We don't need to. That's so right. We don't need to only teach about the 5 African American heroes that we are allowed to talk about in really like not factual ways.
Yeah,
why aren't we talking about Latinos or exactly? Yeah. Why aren't we talking about Black Asian people? Why aren't we talking about there's so much more. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. All right, y'all. Before we go, we do Out of Africa every week, and this week Beyonce took us there. Black is King premiered last week. It quickly became the highest watched special on Disney Plus, which is like a funny thing to say because 1, duh, but 2, Disney Plus hasn't even been out that long. But
right, and The Mandalorian is awesome. So if you pass that, you're doing something.
Hello. So I watched it. I thought it was beautiful when it got to her doing brown skin girl. I feel like I watched like this the whole time. Anybody knows I'm completely obsessed with Kelly Rowland and Naomi Campbell, and it was like, oh my gosh, this is like my dream. But it was nice, and you know, not everybody's gonna love it, and there are a lot of valid criticisms from different people watching. But for me, it made me feel really good. What about you all?
I only seen the first 20 minutes just before we started the podcast, and waiting for this podcast to end. I really want to finish it. It's what I've seen so far is great. You know, I'm all, you know, romanticizing Africa now since I got back. So like this is right up my alley. It's great.
Yeah.
This is all the stuff I've been wanting to see.
The visuals are amazing. The fashion is amazing. The visuals are amazing. The culture, the message. I love it. I love it.
I've watched it 5 times. Okay.
Okay.
I think
the other day you only watched it 3. You're still going back.
Yeah, I can't stop. It's just so like, the first time I watched it, I cried. Like I just feel like
Yeah.
we can really come through in a way that like just pulls emotion. And I understand the criticism, I really do. And it's funny you say romanticizing, because that's part of the criticism, right? That came out of it. And I get, you know, that people have all these thoughts, and I understand, but it's just like, give us a minute to just feel good. There's just like, we've been in freaking quarantine. We've been watching protests. We're watching people die. Like, I need a moment. Okay. So that is my moment. Beyonce is my moment to just feel good and just watch something in a light that's very positive, that's very beautiful, that makes you, and like Brooke said, like, it makes you feel good. Like, how can you, I don't know. I feel like sometimes you need that. I can't politicize everything. And Brooke knows I'm very, like, I politicize a lot of stuff, but like, I need a moment.
I'm sure every time you watch it, you find something new, right? You're like, oh, I didn't catch that the first time.
Right.
You know?
It's just so peaceful. It's beautiful. And I think one of the many, many good things about Beyonce, but with her project, she's very intentional, right? And so this was a celebration of Africa, not just in I'm going to go there and take pretty pictures there, but from what she's wearing, from who made what she's wearing, from who's acting in it alongside her, whose voices she's uplifting. Everything is very intentional. There were also other artists who got to have their own shine. Also, even Pharrell popped up, and I was like, oh my God, I forgot he did this song.
I did the same thing. I was like, is that Pharrell?
I also read something that the song "The Lion Sleeps Tonight," that there's a story, and there's a Netflix series based on this, but that it was written by a South African man, and he never got the credit for the song. And the only music clip, because there's the Lion King soundtrack, and then there's Beyonce's The Gift. So this is based on The Gift, but the only song that is actually from the movie that's in Black is King is his version of The Lion Sleeps Tonight.
Wow.
Like, that's intentional, which also, like, if she can't do anything about any royalties or anything before, but she can start now, and that would go to his estate, his family. So she's just a thoughtful queen, I am a Beyonce fan. I feel like that's,
I know my son was like, you didn't tell me this was a musical. I said, it's Beyonce, son. Please don't say anything negative.
Okay.
just stop right now. Just
I feel like the meme from Candyland or Candyman.
Right? Go and put some respect
before we go,
on her name.
If you all want to share your social medias, if you want to talk a little bit about your business, Chris, if you don't want to, that's okay. Some people like to say private on the internet, but it's totally up to you. You two have the floor.
Well, you can follow me on Instagram, and I do lots of pop-ups in the Tampa Bay area. It's a multicultural dessert shop, so if you can't travel around the world this year, I always have different things on the menu that can take your taste buds for a ride. It's hollidaybakes.com, HOLLIDAY, bakes.com, or Chris Holliday. It's 2 S's, 2 L's. So at CHRISS.HOLLIDAY on Instagram, and you guys can find me wherever I'll be on social media. I always post like my location and times and things like that. New menus. Good stuff.
Honey, are you staying private over there?
I mean, I think probably like I'm more active on Twitter. My Instagram is mostly like family and stuff like that. But like on Twitter, I do like to engage in, social and political conversations. And so if you want to follow me there, Bluetoothfly04. And that's just for meaningful dialogue, nothing crazy, not argumentative, but I'm always, looking for a good discussion.
I I love that. I appreciate you both being here. Thank you for listening. If you are seeing this on YouTube, thank you for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe to the podcast. Also, share it with your friends. It's a really big thing. So don't just hold it in, share it. And then also leave us a rating and review, especially if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. Thank you for listening.